Why predators don't attack you while you sleep. There is a moment every single night when you completely shut down. Your eyes close, your muscles go limp, your mind disconnects from the world around you, and for 6, 7, 8 hours, you become the most vulnerable creature on the planet. No vision, no reflexes, no ability to run or fight back. In any other context, that would be a death sentence. Out on the savanna, an antelope that closed its eyes for 8 straight hours would never see the sunrise. A small fish that stopped moving in the middle of the ocean would become someone's lunch within minutes. And yet, every single night, billions of human beings surrender to this state of total defenselessness, in houses, in tents, in hammocks strung between trees, and the vast majority of them simply wake up, unharmed. The question sounds simple, but it conceals one of the most fascinating stories in our entire evolutionary history. Because the answer is not because there are no more predators out there. That is only true for a portion of humanity, the portion living in modern cities far removed from wild nature. For most of our existence as a species, and still today in many regions of the world, lions, hyenas, bears, tigers, and other large carnivores share the same territory as human communities. And yet, attacks during sleep remain extraordinarily rare. There is an evolutionary engineering behind that fact, built over millions of years, and that is exactly what we are going to explore. First, we need to dismantle a myth that adventure films and wildlife documentaries have helped spread, the idea that predators see every living thing as a potential meal. That is simply not how nature works. Hunting is an extremely costly activity in terms of energy, and it is dangerous. A predator injured during a confrontation rarely survives. Unable to run or move with agility, it loses the ability to hunt in the future, and starvation kills it in a slower and more painful way than any prey ever could. Because of this, over millions of years, natural selection favored predators that assess risk with extreme caution before attacking. They do not choose targets at random. They go for easy, predictable targets, prey they already know well. And here is the first key point. The human being, for the overwhelming majority of large predators, is an unknown. A strange animal with unpredictable behavior, one that sometimes walks in groups, sometimes carries objects, sometimes makes odd noises and sudden movements. For a lion or a hyena, attacking a zebra means following a script written over millions of years of coevolution. They know every movement, every reaction, every weak point of that animal. Attacking a human being means stepping into unfamiliar territory, and most predators prefer not to risk what they do not fully understand. This principle has a name in behavioral biology. It is called Neophobia, the instinctive fear of the new and the unknown. And it is one of the most powerful forces protecting us, even though we never notice it. But Neophobia alone does not explain everything. Because there is something even stranger happening. Why is it that a sleeping human, completely still, motionless for hours, does not trigger the hunting instinct in a predator that would normally react to any movement from potential prey? The answer has to do with how predators identify what counts as food. Most large carnivores rely heavily on visual movement cues to activate hunting behavior. An animal running, fleeing, stumbling, showing weakness, that activates an ancient neural circuit that says, prey, pursue. But a human body lying still, in silence, simply does not trigger that circuit in the same way. Without the movement of flight, without the panic, without the scent of adrenaline in the air, many predators genuinely struggle to process that motionless body as a hunting opportunity. It is almost as if, paradoxically, staying completely still is safer than trying to run. Something, by the way, that experts on bear and big cat encounters repeat to this day. In many confrontations, making sudden movements is what triggers the attack, not stillness. But that is only one piece of the puzzle. Because, let us be honest, staying still is not a very reliable strategy when you are completely unconscious and have no control over your own movements. The real answer to our nighttime safety does not lie in a single biological trick, but in a layered set of adaptations that have been accumulating for hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, of years. Let us go back in time. The earliest ancestors of the genus Homo, long before Homo sapiens even existed, slept in trees, just as chimpanzees and gorillas still do today. Up high, out of reach of most ground-based predators, sleep was relatively safe. But at some point in our evolutionary lineage, our ancestors began to descend and spend more time, and eventually the entire night, on the ground. That was one of the most dangerous transitions in the history of our species. When our ancestors left the trees where they slept protected and began living and sleeping on the ground, the risk of predator attacks increased dramatically. And it was precisely in that moment of extreme vulnerability that one of the greatest inventions in the history of life on Earth entered the picture: the control of fire. The oldest evidence of intentional fire use by an ancestor of the genus Homo dates back approximately 1.7 million years, though scientific debate over that timeline continues. Fire was not just for warmth or cooking. It served an absolutely crucial safety function. By keeping people warm through the night and driving away nocturnal predators, fire allowed Homo erectus to finally sleep on the ground with relative security. Almost no terrestrial predator feels comfortable approaching an intense source of light and heat. Fire became, literally, an invisible wall between our ancestors and the teeth lurking in the darkness. But fire alone was still not enough. Because a campfire needs to be fed, and embers that go cold in the middle of the night stop protecting anyone. That is when the second great evolutionary strategy came into play: sleeping in groups. To avoid becoming easy prey for large animals, humans developed the defense of sleeping close together in large numbers, gathered around the fire. There is safety in numbers. A predator evaluating the risk of attacking a group of 10, 20, 30 people sleeping close to one another faces a completely different equation than it would face with a single isolated and defenseless individual. The noise an attack would generate, the possibility of several humans waking at the same moment and reacting collectively, the risk of being surrounded, all of this raises the potential cost of the hunt to a level that most predators simply do not consider worthwhile. And here we arrive at one of the most elegant details of this whole story, something science only confirmed more solidly through recent research. The human biological clock itself appears to have evolved to ensure that someone was always on watch. A 2017 study demonstrated that our own biology contributes to this collective safety, because people within the same group have naturally different biological clocks from one another. While some people feel sleepy early and wake up in the middle of the night, others are naturally more nocturnal, staying alert precisely during the hours when most of the group is deep in sleep. This mosaic of different circadian rhythms meant that someone was always awake, keeping watch over the tribe, without anyone having consciously agreed to do so. The so-called night owls and early birds that exist among us today may, in fact, be a direct echo of that ancient rotation of vigilance shifts that helped keep human groups alive for hundreds of thousands of years. But perhaps the most surprising detail in this entire story is hidden inside the very architecture of our sleep itself. If you compare human sleep to that of other primates, you will notice something odd. We sleep far less than virtually any other primate in nature. Chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, all of them spend, on average, more time asleep than we do. Scientists who study hunter-gatherer communities still living today without access to electricity, such as the Hadza people in Tanzania, discovered something striking. Even without artificial light, without screens, without alarm clocks, without any of the supposed modern villains of poor sleep, these people sleep roughly the same number of hours as someone living in a major city. Evolutionary anthropology holds that the human being was genetically shaped to sleep less than any of our primate relatives, and that is not a flaw in our biological design. It is a feature that was selected precisely because of the constant pressure of predators. Think about it. Shorter, lighter, more fragmented sleep means less time in a state of total unconsciousness and more cycles of partial awakening throughout the night. Every time you turn over in bed, every small awakening you do not even remember in the morning is a remnant of that evolutionary surveillance system. Our sleep was never designed to be a complete 8-hour blackout. It was designed to alternate between deeper phases and lighter phases, exactly like a security system that never fully lowers its guard. And this logic extends far beyond humans. Nature as a whole seems to have arrived, independently, at similar solutions to the same problem: how to rest without becoming vulnerable. Sleeping in the wild is not merely a biological necessity, it is also a survival strategy, since animals must find a way to rest without becoming easy prey for predators. Dolphins, for example, developed a radical solution. They sleep with only half of their brain resting while the other half remains active, in a phenomenon called unihemispheric sleep. This allows them to keep swimming, surfacing to breathe, and maintaining a minimum level of alertness against threats in the marine environment. Horses are able to rest partially while standing, thanks to a locking mechanism in their leg joints that allows them to be ready to flee at any instant, even during rest. Giraffes, in turn, sleep very little, generally between 30 minutes and 2 hours per day, broken into short intervals, precisely because of the high predation risk they face on the open plains of the African savanna. Humans do not have unihemispheric sleep like dolphins, and we do not sleep standing up like horses, but we developed the cultural and social equivalent of those strategies. Fire, the group, shared vigilance, and staggered circadian rhythms. Where individual biology could not solve the problem, social cooperation did. Now, let us bring this story to the present day because it explains a great deal about real encounters between humans and large predators that still occur in certain regions of the world. Research using camera traps in areas where humans and carnivores coexist reveals an interesting pattern. Human presence, even indirect human presence, alters predator behavior. Studies show that high levels of human activity provide diurnal prey with a temporal refuge from predation, supporting what researchers call the human shield hypothesis. In other words, many predators simply and actively avoid the times and places of greatest human activity, adjusting their own hunting routines to other moments. This means that in many regions, the mere constant presence of human beings nearby, even sleeping, already functions as a behavioral repellent. It is also worth noting that much of the fear we feel about being attacked in our sleep is amplified by a well-documented psychological bias. We tend to remember and repeat rare, dramatic stories with far greater intensity than ordinary, uneventful ones. When a wild animal attack during sleep does occur, it becomes news, it becomes a documentary, it gets repeated in conversation for years. But the actual statistics tell a very different story from our emotional perception. For the vast majority of wild animals, human beings are not seen as prey, they are seen as threats to be avoided, and that holds true even for many of the predators that popular culture portrays as the most terrifying. Wild animal attacks on people tend to be statistically rare, or the result of extreme circumstances, such as defense of offspring. Most documented incidents involving large carnivores and humans involve animals that are sick, injured, desperately hungry, or that have lost their natural fear through repeated exposure to humans who fed them, breaking down the psychological barrier that normally keeps us separate. That does not mean the risk is zero. There are, in fact, documented cases of animals attacking sleeping people, particularly in regions where natural habitat has been destroyed, forcing predators dangerously close to human settlements in search of food, or in cases of elderly and weakened animals no longer capable of hunting traditional prey. But these cases are precisely the exception that proves the rule. They happen when the natural system of barriers breaks down, when the fire is gone, when the group has dissolved, when the instinctive fear of the unknown has been eroded by forced and repeated proximity to human beings. At its core, the reason you are able to sleep peacefully through most nights of your life is not luck, and it is not because predators have ceased to exist. It is the result of an extraordinarily sophisticated evolutionary engineering built over millions of years. The instinctive fear most animals feel toward the unknown, the way predators assess risk before any attack, the invention of fire as a shield against the darkness, the protective power of living and sleeping in groups, the staggered biological clocks that ensure constant vigilance without anyone realizing it, and even the fragmented architecture of our own sleep, which never lets us fully disconnect from the world around us. You do not sleep protected because you are stronger, faster, or more dangerous than the animals that could historically have hunted you. You sleep protected because, hundreds of thousands of years ago, your species learned to turn individual vulnerability into collective strength. Every time you turn off the light and close your eyes tonight, you are, without knowing it, repeating a survival ritual that began around a campfire, somewhere in the lost expanse of the African savanna, long before history was ever written. And it is precisely because of that, because of this silent ingenuity passed down through countless generations, that you are able to simply sleep.